The night Clara Dawson decided to run away from her wedding, she made it exactly 3 miles before her horse threw a shoe, and she collapsed in tears beneath a canopy of Wyoming stars that stretched endlessly above the prairie grass. It was August of 1879, and the air still held the day's heat even as midnight approached, wrapping around her like an unwelcome embrace as she sat in the dirt with her expensive white dress pooling around her, now stained with dust and her own desperation. She had left everything behind in Sheridan. The decorated church, the guests dressed in their finest clothes, the man she was supposed to marry but could never love, and her father's furious face when she had lifted her skirts and run straight out the back door during what should have been her processional. Clara knew there would be consequences, knew her father would never forgive her for the embarrassment, but staying felt like a slower death than whatever punishment awaited her now. The tears came harder as reality set in. She had no real plan, no money except the few coins she had managed to grab, and now she did not even have a horse that could carry her anywhere. The vastness of the Wyoming territory suddenly felt less like freedom and more like an endless prison with no walls. That was when she heard the soft footfalls of a horse approaching at a walk, deliberate and unhurried. Clara's heart seized with panic. Had her father already sent someone after her? Would they drag her back to face everyone she had humiliated? "Easy now," a low voice called out, gentle despite its depth. "I am not here to cause any trouble. Just saw someone sitting out here alone and figured I should check if everything was all right." Clara looked up through her tears to see a man dismounting from a paint horse, his silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the practical clothing of a working cowboy rather than the fancy suits she was used to seeing in town. As he stepped closer, removing his hat, she could make out more details in the moonlight. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the edges, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that held genuine concern rather than judgment. "I am fine," Clara lied, her voice breaking on the words. "Please just go. I do not need help." The cowboy stood there for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands, then slowly lowered himself to sit in the grass a respectful distance from her. He did not speak at first, just gazed up at the stars as if he had all the time in the world. "Those stars do not care much about our problems," he finally said. "Been sitting under them myself plenty of nights when things got rough. Something about them makes you realize how small our troubles are, but also how big they feel when they are happening to you." Despite herself, Clara found her sobs quieting. There was something calming about his presence, the way he was not demanding explanations or trying to fix everything immediately. "What's your name?" she asked after a while, wiping at her eyes with her dirty sleeve. "Flynn Irving," he replied, glancing over at her with a slight smile. "I work on the Triple Creek Ranch about 10 miles west of Sheridan. Was heading back from delivering some horses when I spotted you. And you are Clara Dawson." The name felt heavy with all its implications. Everyone in Sheridan knew the Dawson name. Her father owned the largest mercantile in town and half the property along Main Street. Though I suppose that name does not mean much out here. Should it mean something? Flynn asked without any particular interest in the social standing it might carry. "You are just a person sitting under the stars, same as anyone else." That simple statement made Clara want to cry all over again, but this time for different reasons. When was the last time anyone had seen her as just a person rather than Walter Dawson's daughter, a valuable piece in social chess games and business arrangements? "I ran away from my wedding," Clara admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I left everyone standing there. My father, the guests, the man I was supposed to marry. I just could not do it. I could not spend the rest of my life with someone I did not love, living a life that was not mine. Flynn was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. That must have taken a lot of courage. It was not courage, Clara said bitterly. It was cowardice. A brave person would have said no from the start instead of letting it get all the way to the altar. A coward would have gone through with it, Flynn countered. You did the hard thing, even if it was not the neat and tidy way. That counts for something. They sat in silence for a while longer, and Clara found herself studying this stranger who had chosen to sit beside her rather than ride past. There was a calmness to Flynn that she found unusual in men. Most of the men she knew were always posturing, always trying to prove something. Flynn just seemed comfortable with himself and the quiet night around them. "What am I going to do?" Clara asked, more to herself than to him. "I cannot go back. My father will either force me to marry Thomas anyway or lock me away, and I have nowhere else to go." "You could come to the ranch," Flynn said carefully. "The owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson, she is always looking for help with the house and the cooking. It is hard work and the pay is not much, but you would have a place to stay and food to eat. It would give you time to figure things out." Clara turned to look at him directly. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." Flynn met her gaze steadily. "Because someone sitting alone and crying under the stars needs help, and I was raised to offer it when I could. Simple as that." There was no ulterior motive in his eyes, no calculation. Just honest kindness, something Clara realized she had experienced far too little of in her life. "I do not know anything about ranch work," she warned. "I have spent my whole life in town, learning to be a proper lady. I can embroider and play piano, but I have never cooked over a real stove or cleaned anything more demanding than my own bedroom." "Everyone starts somewhere," Flynn said, standing and offering her his hand. "Mrs. Patterson is patient, and she will teach you what you need to know. The question is, do you want to spend the rest of your life embroidering, or do you want to learn what else you might be capable of?" Clara stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Taking it felt like crossing a threshold she could never go back through. But then again, she had already crossed that threshold when she ran from the church. The only question now was whether she would move forward or let herself be dragged backward. She placed her hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. "My horse," she said, gesturing to where the animal stood grazing, favoring its front left leg. "It threw a shoe." Flynn walked over to examine the horse, running his hands gently down its leg. "She will be fine. Just cannot ride her like this. I will lead her behind my horse, and you can ride with me if that is acceptable to you." The impropriety of it flashed through Clara's mind, but then she almost laughed at herself. She had just run away from her wedding. Propriety was hardly her biggest concern anymore. "That would be acceptable," she said. "Thank you." Flynn mounted his paint horse first, then reached down to help Clara up behind him. She hesitated just a moment before settling onto the horse's back, trying to arrange her voluminous skirts in some manageable way. When she finally gave up and just held onto Flynn's waist to steady herself, she felt him tense slightly before relaxing. "Hold on," he said simply, and clicked his tongue to urge the horse forward at a gentle walk, leading Clara's injured horse behind them. As they rode through the darkness toward the Triple Creek Ranch, Clara found herself very aware of the warmth of Flynn's back against her cheek, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the capable way he handled both horses. She had been held by Thomas a handful of times during proper, chaperoned courtship calls, and each time it had felt suffocating and wrong. This felt different, natural, safe. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said after they had been riding for a while. "Sure." "Why were you out here so late?" "You said you were delivering horses, but that seems like an odd time for it." She felt Flynn's small laugh more than heard it. The horse I was delivering had a foal that was not quite ready to be separated from its mother. I stayed late to make sure the foal was eating all right before I left. Lost track of time. You care about the animals, Clara observed. They depend on us, Flynn replied. Seems only right to care about them when they cannot care for themselves in our world. Something about that statement, simple as it was, told Clara more about Flynn Irving's character than any lengthy introduction could have. Here was a man who thought about the vulnerable, who stayed late to ensure a foal was eating properly, who stopped to sit with a crying stranger under the stars. The Triple Creek Ranch came into view as false dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon. It was a sprawling property with a large main house, several outbuildings, corrals with horses, and the vast grassland stretching beyond. Lantern lights showed in the main house's windows, and smoke rose from the chimney. The Pattersons wake early, Flynn explained as they approached. Mr. Patterson has been running this ranch for 20 years. Good people, fair employers. He helped Clara down from the horse first, his hands steady at her waist, then dismounted himself. Clara swayed slightly, her legs stiff from the ride and the emotional exhaustion of the past few hours. Steady, Flynn said, keeping a light hand on her elbow until she found her balance. The front door opened, and a woman in her 50s stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. She had kind eyes and silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her gaze took in Clara's ruined wedding dress, her tear-stained face, and Flynn standing protectively nearby. "Flynn," she said warmly, then with curiosity, "who have you brought us?" "Mrs. Patterson, this is Clara Dawson. She needs help, and I thought you might have room for another set of hands around here." Mrs. Patterson studied Clara for a long moment, and Clara found herself standing straighter despite her exhaustion, trying to look capable even in her ridiculous dress. "Clara Dawson," Mrs. Patterson repeated slowly. "You are Walter Dawson's daughter, are you not? From Sheridan." Clara's heart sank. Of course they would know. "Yes, madam, but I am hoping to make my own way now, separate from my father's name." "I see." Mrs. Patterson's expression was unreadable. Then she stepped aside and gestured toward the house. "You look like you have had a very long night, dear. Come inside, have some breakfast, and we will talk about what comes next. Flynn, you should eat too before you head to the bunkhouse to rest." The kitchen was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. A large man with a graying beard looked up from his seat at the table as they entered. This was clearly Mr. Patterson, the ranch owner. "Found her crying out on the prairie," Flynn explained simply. "Figured she could use some kindness." Mr. Patterson grunted, which might have been approval or mere acknowledgement, and returned to his breakfast. Mrs. Patterson bustled around, setting plates before Clara and Flynn, filling cups with hot coffee. Clara found that despite everything, she was ravenous. She could not remember the last time she had eaten. Yesterday's lunch, maybe, before the wedding preparations had consumed everything. "I heard there was quite a commotion in Sheridan yesterday," Mrs. Patterson said conversationally as she worked. "A wedding that did not quite happen the way it was planned." Clara flushed but kept her head up. "That was me. I am the one who ran." "Good for you," Mrs. Patterson said, surprising her. "I heard about that match your father arranged. Thomas Whitmore is 20 years your senior and has already buried one wife under suspicious circumstances. Your father must have been getting quite a lot out of that arrangement to push you toward it." "He was," Clara said quietly. "Thomas owns the railroad contract that my father wants access to. I was the price of that access." "Well, you are not for sale," Mrs. Patterson declared firmly. "No woman is. Now, Flynn here thinks you might want to work for your keep while you figure out what comes next. Can you cook?" "Not really," Clara admitted. I can follow a recipe if someone shows me, but I have never done much real cooking. Can you clean? I am a very fast learner. Mrs. Patterson smiled. That is the right answer. I can teach anyone who is willing to learn. The question is whether you are willing to do actual hard work. Ranch life is not like town life, girl. We wake before dawn, work until after dark, and everyone pulls their weight. I want to work, Clara said with more conviction than she had felt about anything in a long time. I want to be useful. I want to learn what I am capable of. She glanced at Flynn as she said it and found him watching her with something like approval in his eyes. Then you have a place here, Mr. Patterson spoke up for the first time. But understand this. Your father will come looking. Walter Dawson is not a man who accepts embarrassment or defiance. When he shows up, which he will, we will not lie for you, but we will not force you to go with him either. You are old enough to make your own choices. You are what, 20? 21, Clara confirmed. As of last month. An adult then, Mr. Patterson said. Your father has no legal claim on you. He can bluster and threaten, but the law is on your side. Just be prepared for it to get ugly. I understand, Clara said, though the thought of facing her father made her stomach clench with anxiety. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank Flynn, Mrs. Patterson said. He is the one who brought you here and vouched for you. Clara turned to Flynn, who looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. Thank you, she said softly. You did not have to stop, did not have to help, but I am grateful that you did. It was the right thing to do, Flynn said simply, finishing the last of his coffee. I should get some rest, been up all night. He stood, nodded to the Pattersons, and let his eyes linger on Clara for just a moment. Welcome to the Triple Creek. After Flynn left, Mrs. Patterson showed Clara to a small room off the kitchen. It was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for belongings. The window looked out over the corrals and the prairie beyond. This was where my daughter stayed before she married and moved to Cheyenne, Mrs. Patterson explained. It is not fancy, but it is yours for as long as you need it. There is a dress or two in the trunk that might fit you. We will get you some proper work clothes when we go into town next. It is perfect, Clara said honestly. The room was small, but it was hers. Not decorated according to her father's taste or designed to impress visitors. Just a simple, honest space. Get some sleep, Mrs. Patterson advised. You look ready to fall over. We will start your training this afternoon. Clara managed to get out of her wedding dress, the buttons fighting her tired fingers. She left it in a heap on the floor and pulled on a simple cotton nightgown she found in the trunk. The moment her head touched the pillow, she was asleep. She woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices outside. For a moment, Clara was disoriented, not recognizing where she was. Then memory flooded back, and with it came a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had really done it. She had run away, and now she was at her ranch, and she had agreed to work, and she had no idea what she was doing. The dress Mrs. Patterson had mentioned turned out to be a sturdy brown cotton day dress, much simpler than anything Clara had owned before, but well made and comfortable. It fit reasonably well, just a bit loose in the waist. Clara braided her long blonde hair simply and pinned it up, then made her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson was there, along with two other women Clara had not met yet. One was a younger woman, perhaps a few years older than Clara, with dark hair and sun-bronzed skin. The other was older, perhaps in her 40s, with red hair going gray at the temples. There you are, Mrs. Patterson said warmly. Girls, this is Clara. She will be helping us around here. Clara, this is Maria and Susan. Maria helps with the cooking and the laundry. Susan manages the chickens and the vegetable garden. Nice to meet you, Clara said, suddenly shy. These women knew how to do real work, useful things. What did she have to offer? First day is always overwhelming, Susan said kindly, as if reading her thoughts. You will get the hang of it. Everyone does. We will start you on something simple, Mrs. Patterson decided. Maria, show Clara how to knead bread dough. Susan, you will need to gather eggs soon. Clara can go with you after and learn where everything is. The afternoon passed in a blur of new information. Kneading bread was harder than it looked, requiring more strength in her arms than Clara had realized. Her hands cramped, and flour got everywhere. But Maria was patient, showing her the rhythm and technique until Clara started to get the feel of it. Gathering eggs with Susan was an adventure. The chickens were aggressive, pecking at Clara's hands and flapping away indignantly when she reached into their nesting boxes. Susan laughed good-naturedly at Clara's nervousness and showed her how to be confident and quick. They can sense fear, Susan explained. Just reach in like you have every right to be there, grab the egg and move on. They will squawk, but they will not really hurt you. By the time dinner needed to be prepared, Clara's arms ached. She had small pecks on her hands from the chickens, and she was fairly certain she had never been so tired in her life. But there was something satisfying about it too. She had done things. Real, tangible things. She had created something with her hands. The ranch hands came in for dinner as the sun was setting. There were about a dozen of them, all hungry men who worked hard and ate accordingly. Clara helped Maria and Mrs. Patterson serve the meal, trying not to feel self-conscious as the men looked at her curiously. Most of them were polite, nodding their thanks as she filled their plates. A few looked at her a bit too long, but a sharp look from Mr. Patterson ended that quickly. Flynn came in last, hanging back until the others had served themselves. He was clean but tired-looking, his dark hair still damp from washing. When Clara handed him his plate, their fingers brushed briefly, and she felt that same sense of safety she had felt the night before. "How was your first day?" he asked quietly. "My hands hurt, the chickens hate me, and I am not sure my bread will be edible," Clara replied honestly. "But it was good, really good." Flynn smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed his usually serious face. "That sounds about right for a first day. It gets easier. You come to the main house for dinner every night, most nights. Some of the hands prefer to cook for themselves in the bunkhouse, but Mrs. Patterson's cooking is too good to pass up." "She is wonderful," Clara agreed. "They all are. I still cannot quite believe they took me in without question. People out here understand that everyone needs a fresh start sometimes," Flynn said. "We do not judge based on where you came from, just who you choose to be now." Before Clara could respond, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Raised voices, the sound of multiple horses. Mr. Patterson stood quickly, his expression darkening. "Stay inside," he told the household, then headed for the door with several of his ranch hands following. Clara felt her blood turn cold. She knew, even before she heard the familiar booming voice, exactly who had arrived. "Where is she?" Walter Dawson's voice carried clearly through the open door. "I know you have her here." Someone saw Flynn Irving riding toward this ranch with a woman matching my daughter's description. "I want her back. Now." Mrs. Patterson moved to stand beside Clara, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You do not have to go out there. You do not have to see him if you do not want to." But Clara found herself moving toward the door anyway. She had run once, and it had been necessary. But she would not hide now. If she was going to claim her independence, she had to face her father and make her position clear. Flynn moved to intercept her as she approached the door. "You should stay inside," he said quietly. "Let Mr. Patterson handle it." "He is my father," Clara said. "I need to face him myself." She saw the concern in Flynn's eyes, but he stepped aside. He did, however, follow her out onto the porch, staying close enough to intervene if needed. Walter Dawson sat on his horse in the yard, flanked by 4 men Clara recognized as working for his mercantile. Her father was a large man, barrel-chested and imposing, with a thick mustache and eyes that could cut through steel. Right now, those eyes were fixed on Clara with an expression of pure fury. "Get on a horse," he commanded without preamble. "You are coming home right now. Do you have any idea what you have done? The embarrassment you have caused? Thomas Whitmore is threatening to withdraw from all our business arrangements. I have had to beg and grovel to try to salvage this situation." "No," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am not coming home. I am staying here. You are my daughter. You will do as I say." "I am 21 years old," Clara replied, stepping further out onto the porch. Flynn moved with her, a silent presence at her side. "I am an adult. You cannot force me to return, and you certainly cannot force me to marry someone I do not love." "Love." Walter spat the word like it was poison. "You foolish girl. Love has nothing to do with marriage. Marriage is a business arrangement, a strategic alliance. I gave you every advantage, every opportunity, and this is how you repay me. By humiliating me in front of the entire town. You tried to sell me," Clara said, her voice rising. "You tried to sell me to a man old enough to be my father, a man whose first wife died under suspicious circumstances, all so you could get access to his railroad contracts. I am not merchandise, father. I am a person." "You are an ungrateful, disobedient child," Walter snarled. "And if you think you can survive out here playing at being a ranch hand, you are even more foolish than I thought. You will come crawling back within a week, and when you do, you will marry Thomas Whitmore and you will be grateful for it." "She is not going anywhere she does not want to go," Mr. Patterson spoke up firmly. "This is my land, Walter, and she is under my protection. You need to leave. You are harboring my daughter against my will." "I am providing employment to an adult woman who requested it," Mr. Patterson corrected. "There is nothing illegal or improper about it. Now you have said your piece. Time for you to go." For a moment, Clara thought her father might actually try to grab her, might order his men to drag her off the porch. The tension in the yard was thick enough to cut. Then Walter's eyes landed on Flynn, standing protectively beside Clara, and his expression turned calculating. "I see," Walter said coldly. "You have taken up with a cowboy, thrown away your reputation and your future for some ranch hand with nothing to his name. Your mother would be ashamed of you." The mention of her mother, who had died when Clara was 12, hit like a physical blow. But Clara refused to let her father see her flinch. "My mother would have understood," Clara said quietly. "She married you because her father forced her to, and she was miserable every day of her life. I remember, father." I remember the sadness in her eyes, the way she would sit by the window staring out like she was trapped. "I will not live that life. I would rather be poor and free than rich and caged." Something flickered across Walter Dawson's face, something that might have been shame or anger or both. Then his expression hardened again. "You are no daughter of mine," he declared. "If you stay here, you are dead to me. No money, no inheritance, no family name, you will be nothing." "Then I will be nothing," Clara said, surprised by how much the words did not hurt. How light she felt, actually, like chains she had not realized she was wearing had just fallen away. "Goodbye, father." Walter Dawson wheeled his horse around violently and rode off without another word, his men scrambling to follow. They all watched until the group disappeared into the growing darkness. Clara found that she was shaking, adrenaline flooding through her system now that the confrontation was over. Flynn's hand found hers, warm and steady. "You did it," he said quietly. "That took real courage." "I feel like I might be sick," Clara admitted. "Come sit down," Mrs. Patterson said, guiding her back inside. "Susan, get her some water. Maria, Bring some of that bread we made today. Nothing settles a stomach like bread." The rest of the evening was subdued. The ranch hands finished their meal and headed back to the bunkhouse, giving Clara space. Flynn stayed, though, sitting at the kitchen table while Clara sipped her water and tried to process everything that had just happened. "He meant it," she said finally. "About disowning me. He will follow through." "Does that change anything for you?" Flynn asked. Clara thought about it honestly. She had grown up with money, with comfort, with every material thing she could want. But she had never been happy, never felt like herself. The past 24 hours, exhausting and terrifying as they had been, had felt more real than her entire previous life. "No," she said, "it does not change anything. I would rather have nothing and be free than have everything and be trapped." "You will not have nothing, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You have a job, a place to stay, and people who will look out for you. That is more than nothing." Over the following weeks, Clara learned what it meant to truly work. She woke before dawn and did not stop moving until well after dark. Her hands, which had always been soft and carefully maintained, became rough and calloused. Her back ached from bending over washboards and scrubbing floors. The chickens still pecked at her, though less aggressively as they became accustomed to her presence. But with each passing day, Clara also felt herself growing stronger. Not just physically, though that was certainly true. She felt more solid somehow, more present in her own skin. She was building something real with her own two hands, creating value through her own effort rather than simply existing as her father's ornamental daughter. Flynn was there through all of it, not hovering but present. He would appear at just the right moments, carrying heavy buckets of water she had been struggling with, showing her the easier way to lift bales of hay, staying late in the kitchen to keep her company while she finished the evening dishes. They talked during those stolen moments. Flynn told her about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about making his way west and learning the cattle trade. His life had been hard, full of losses and struggles, but he spoke about it without bitterness, just as facts that had shaped who he became. Clara told him about her mother, about the loneliness of being raised in her father's house after her mother died, about the pressure to be perfect and agreeable and marriageable, about feeling like she was slowly suffocating under the weight of expectations. "You seem different now," Flynn observed one evening as they sat on the porch steps, watching the stars emerge. "More yourself, maybe." "I feel different," Clara agreed. "Like I was playing a role before and now I finally get to be real." "I like the real you," Flynn said, then seemed embarrassed by his own boldness. "I mean, not that I did not like you before. I did not really know you before. But the person you are now, the way you keep trying even when things are hard, the way you laugh when the chickens outsmart you instead of getting angry. I like that person." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I like who I am around you," she admitted. "You see me differently than anyone else ever has. Not as something to be managed or molded or used, just as a person." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, shoulders almost touching. The air between them felt charged with possibility, with things unspoken but deeply felt. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said eventually. "Anything. That night you found me, why did you really stop? You could have kept riding, most people would have." Flynn was quiet for a long moment. "I had a sister," he said finally, "younger than me. When times got hard after our parents died, she thought she had to marry the first man who offered, someone who would take care of her. He was not kind. She wrote me letters sometimes, and I could read between the lines how unhappy she was, how trapped. By the time I saved enough money to go get her, she had died in childbirth. She was only 19. Flynn, I am so sorry." When I saw you sitting there in that wedding dress, crying like your heart was breaking, all I could think was that maybe I could help this time. Maybe this was a second chance to do what I could not do for Sarah. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out and took Flynn's hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You saved me," she said softly. "You really did. I do not know what would have happened if you had not stopped, but I know it would not have been good." Flynn squeezed her hand gently. "You saved yourself. You were the one brave enough to run, brave enough to try something new. I just sat beside you for a bit." "You have been sitting beside me ever since," Clara pointed out. "Is that all right?" Flynn asked, turning to look at her directly. "I do not want to presume or make you uncomfortable. I know you just got out of an unwanted engagement. The last thing I want is to pressure you or make you feel obligated." "You are not," Clara assured him. "I like having you beside me. I like it very much." The look Flynn gave her then made Clara's breath catch. There was warmth in his eyes and affection, and something deeper that sent tingles down her spine. "Clara," he said, his voice rough. "I know it is too soon, and I know you need time, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is not just concern or friendship. I am falling for you. Have been since that first night. And I will wait as long as you need, but I wanted to be honest about where I stand." Clara's heart was racing. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such honesty and vulnerability. Thomas had made declarations of what a good wife she would be, how useful the connection would be. Her father had spoken of duty and expectation. But Flynn was offering her something completely different. He was offering her his heart without demanding anything in return. "I am falling for you too," Clara whispered. "I did not know it could be like this, that someone could make you feel safe and excited at the same time, that you could want to spend every moment with someone not because you have to, but because they make everything better. Can I kiss you?" Flynn asked, lifting his free hand to gently cup her cheek. "Yes," Clara breathed. "Please, yes." Flynn leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. But Clara did not want to change her mind. She wanted him, with a certainty that went bone deep. When their lips met, it was soft and sweet and perfect. Nothing like the wet, demanding kisses Thomas had forced on her during their chaperoned courtship. This was gentle and respectful and full of promise. Clara found herself leaning into it, her free hand coming up to rest against Flynn's chest where she could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I wish you had done it sooner," Clara replied, making him laugh softly. They sat there for a while longer, holding hands and stealing kisses, until Mrs. Patterson called from inside that it was getting late and they should both get some rest. As Clara lay in bed that night, she thought about how much her life had changed. 2 months ago, she had been preparing for a wedding she dreaded, trapped in a future she did not choose. Now she was working on a ranch, her hands calloused and her muscles sore, and she had never been happier. And Flynn, sweet, honorable Flynn, was falling in love with her. Life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm as summer gave way to autumn. Clara continued to learn and grow more competent at her tasks. Her bread no longer came out dense and heavy. She could gather eggs without getting pecked more than once or twice. She had even learned to ride properly, spending early mornings before breakfast helping Flynn with the horses. Those were Clara's favorite times, the quiet dawn hours when the world was still waking up and it was just her and Flynn in the barn or the corrals. He was endlessly patient as a teacher, never making her feel foolish when she struggled with something. His hands would cover hers, showing her the right way to hold the reins, how to sit properly in the saddle. Those casual touches left Clara breathless in ways she had never experienced before. Their relationship deepened naturally over those weeks. Stolen kisses in quiet corners, hands held under the dinner table, long conversations on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. Flynn continued to court her properly, despite their attraction. He never pushed for more than Clara was ready to give, always respectful of her boundaries. "You are a gentleman," Clara teased him one evening after he had walked her to her door and kissed her good night with clear restraint despite the heat between them. "I am trying to be," Flynn said, his voice strained. "You deserve to be courted properly, to be respected." "I appreciate that," Clara said softly. "But Flynn, I am not made of glass. I will not break, and I want you to more than I think I should admit." Flynn groaned softly. "You are making this very difficult." "Good," Clara replied with a smile, then slipped inside before he could respond, leaving him standing there looking both frustrated and delighted. In late October, word came that Thomas Whitmore had announced his engagement to another woman, the daughter of a banker in Cheyenne. Mrs. Patterson shared the news carefully, watching Clara's face for any sign of regret or distress. Instead, Clara felt only relief. "I hope she is happy," she said honestly. "Or at least I hope he treats her better than I suspect he would have treated me." "No regrets?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Not a single one," Clara confirmed. "Everything that has happened since that night has been a gift, even the hard parts." "You have become quite the ranch hand," Mrs. Patterson said with approval. "When you first arrived, I was not sure you would last a week, but you have surprised all of us. You work hard, you do not complain, and you have fit right in here." "This place gave me a chance to find out who I really am," Clara said. "How could I not love it?" "And what have you found out about who you really are?" Clara thought about it. "I am stronger than I knew, more capable. I like working with my hands, like seeing the tangible results of my effort. I like being useful. And I am someone who does not give up when things get difficult." "You are also someone who is in love," Mrs. Patterson added with a knowing smile. "That boy looks at you like you hung the moon." Clara felt herself blushing. "He is wonderful. I never knew it could be like this, that being with someone could feel so easy and right." "He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "He has worked here for 3 years now, and I have never seen him do a dishonest or unkind thing. His word is solid, and his work ethic is beyond reproach. He will make a good husband when the time comes." The word husband sent a thrill through Clara that was entirely different from the dread she had felt when it applied to Thomas. Marrying Flynn was something she could imagine wanting, when they were ready. Waking up beside him every morning, building a life together, maybe someday having children who would grow up learning to be kind and strong like their father. "We are not rushing anything," Clara said, though the protest felt weak even to her. "Of course not," Mrs. Patterson agreed, "but there is nothing wrong with thinking about the future either." As November arrived and the weather turned colder, preparations began for winter. The ranch was a flurry of activity as everyone worked to ensure the livestock would be protected, and the household supplied through the harsh months ahead. Clara found herself working alongside Flynn more often, helping to move hay bales and secure buildings against the coming storms. One particularly cold afternoon, they were in the barn together, Clara helping Flynn repair a broken stall door. Her hands were freezing despite her gloves, and she was fairly certain she had never been this tired. "Here," Flynn said, taking her hands between his and breathing warm air onto them. "You are frozen." "I am fine," Clara protested, though she made no move to pull away. "You are stubborn," Flynn corrected affectionately. "We should go inside. This can wait until tomorrow. I want to help you finish." Flynn looked at her for a long moment, something tender in his expression. "Clara Dawson, what am I going to do with you?" "Love me, I hope," Clara said before she could think better of it. I already do, Flynn replied seriously. So much it scares me sometimes. I never thought I would have this, someone to care about who cares back. Someone who sees me and chooses to stay. I will always choose to stay, Clara promised. You are my home now, Flynn, more than any place could ever be. Flynn kissed her then, deep and thorough, his cold hands coming up to frame her face. Clara pressed closer, wanting to memorize this moment, the scratch of hay beneath her feet, the smell of horses and leather, the taste of Flynn's lips. When they broke apart, Flynn was breathing hard. "Marry me," he said suddenly. "I know it has not been that long and I do not have much to offer you yet. But I am saving money, and I have been talking to Mr. Patterson about buying some land nearby. We could build our own place eventually, start our own small ranch. I would work hard for you, Clara. I would spend every day trying to make you happy." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You already make me happy, every single day. And yes, Flynn Irving, yes, I will marry you." The joy that broke across Flynn's face was worth everything Clara had given up and more. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing, and then he was kissing her again, and Clara felt like her heart might burst from how full it was. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Mrs. Patterson helped Clara sew a dress from blue calico, practical and pretty. Mr. Patterson stood as a witness, along with Maria and Susan and several of the ranch hands. There was no church, no crowd of guests, no expensive decorations. Just two people who loved each other, standing under the winter sky and promising their lives to one another. Clara wore wildflowers in her hair that Flynn had ridden 2 hours to find, sheltered in a canyon where winter had not yet reached. When he placed a simple gold band on her finger, purchased with his carefully saved wages, Clara thought it was more beautiful than any expensive ring could have been. "I love you," Flynn said as they kissed as husband and wife for the first time. "I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Clara replied. "Thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for sitting beside me under the stars. Thank you for showing me what love really means." Their wedding night was spent in Flynn's room in the bunkhouse, which was not exactly romantic, but Clara did not care. She was with Flynn, her husband, the man she loved beyond all reason. He was gentle with her, patient and tender, and Clara finally understood what everyone meant when they talked about the marriage bed being a joy rather than a duty. Afterward, lying wrapped in Flynn's arms, Clara thought about her old life. The fancy house in Sheridan, the expensive dresses, the social obligations. None of it had ever made her feel the way she felt right now, safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. "What are you thinking about?" Flynn asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "About how different my life is now," Clara said. "About how I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts, especially not the hard parts. They brought me here to you. Everything that happened, everything I gave up, it was all worth it for this moment." "You gave up a lot," Flynn acknowledged. "Sometimes I worry I am not enough, that you will regret choosing this life." Clara propped herself up on one elbow so she could look at him directly. "Listen to me. You are everything. You are kind and good and honest. You work hard and you treat people with respect. You make me laugh and you make me feel safe, and you see me as a whole person rather than an ornament or a tool. How could I possibly regret choosing you?" "I am going to make sure you never do," Flynn promised. "I am going to build us a good life, Clara. It might not be fancy, but it will be ours." "That sounds perfect," Clara whispered, kissing him softly. The winter was harsh, but Clara hardly noticed. She was too happy, too warm in the glow of her new marriage. She and Flynn continued living at the ranch, saving money toward their future. Flynn worked longer hours, taking on extra tasks to earn more. Clara continued helping Mrs. Patterson while also learning from Flynn about horses and cattle, determined to be a true partner when they eventually got their own place. They spent their evenings planning, sketching out what their ranch house might look like, deciding how many acres they would need, what stock they wanted to raise. Flynn wanted to focus on horses, breeding and training them. Clara found she loved that idea, remembering the gentle way Flynn had taught her to ride, his natural connection with the animals. "We will call it the Evening Star Ranch," Clara suggested one night, "after the stars that were out the night we met." Flynn loved that idea, and it became real to both of them after that. Not just some vague future dream, but an actual goal they were working toward together. In February, Clara realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not been certain. When Mrs. Patterson confirmed it, Clara felt a mix of joy and terror. "How do you feel about it?" Mrs. Patterson asked gently. "Scared," Clara admitted, "but happy too. I want Flynn's children. I want to be a mother to do it better than my own mother could in her circumstances. But I am frightened of the birthing, of the responsibility." "Every woman feels that way with her first," Mrs. Patterson reassured her. "But you are strong, Clara. You have proven that over and over. And you will have help. I will be here and Flynn will support you every step of the way." Telling Flynn that evening was one of the best moments of Clara's life. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure elated joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "You are going to have my baby." "We are going to have a baby," Clara confirmed, laughing at his reaction. "You are going to be a father." Flynn pulled her into his arms carefully as if she might break. "This is the happiest day of my life," he said against her hair. "Well, second happiest. The day you married me is still first." "We need our own place before the baby comes," Clara said practically. "I am not giving birth in the bunkhouse." "No, absolutely not," Flynn agreed immediately. "I will talk to Mr. Patterson tomorrow about advancing me some of my wages. And there is a section of land about a mile from here that might be available. It is not much, but it is a start." True to his word, Flynn spoke to Mr. Patterson the next day. The ranch owner was generous, advancing Flynn enough money to purchase 40 acres adjoining the Triple Creek property. It was not much, as Flynn had said, but it had good water and grass, and a sheltered spot perfect for building a house. Over the next months, Clara watched their home take shape. Flynn worked on it every spare moment he had, sometimes late into the night by lantern light. Other ranch hands helped when they could, raising walls and framing the roof. It was a simple structure, just 4 rooms, but it was solid and well built and entirely theirs. Mrs. Patterson helped Clara prepare for the baby, sewing small clothes and teaching her what to expect. Clara's body changed, her belly growing round, and while it was sometimes uncomfortable, she loved seeing the physical evidence of the life she and Flynn had created together. On a warm evening in late September, almost exactly a year after that night when Flynn had found her crying under the stars, Clara went into labor. Flynn was terrified, pacing outside while Mrs. Patterson and Maria attended to Clara inside their new home. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara thought she might not survive it. But Mrs. Patterson's steady voice kept her grounded, and the thought of Flynn waiting outside gave her strength. Just after midnight, Clara delivered a healthy baby boy. When Mrs. Patterson placed him in her arms, Clara felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He was perfect, with dark hair like Flynn's and tiny fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength. Flynn was allowed in a few minutes later, and the look on his face when he saw his son was something Clara would never forget. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and when he touched the baby's tiny hand, tears ran down his face. "He is perfect," Flynn whispered. Clara, you did it. You are amazing. We did it, Clara corrected. Together. Everything we do is together. They named him Samuel after Flynn's father. Samuel Irving would grow up on the Evening Star Ranch, learning to ride before he could walk properly, helping his father with the horses, listening to his mother's stories about how she ran away from her wedding and found her true home instead. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. Flynn built the Evening Star into a successful horse ranch, known throughout the territory for quality breeding stock and expert training. Clara managed the household and helped with the business side, her education finally proving useful as she handled the books and correspondence. They had 3 more children over the years, a daughter they named Sarah after Flynn's sister, and then twin boys they called James and Thomas. Each birth terrified Flynn, and each time Clara came through it, he would hold her afterward and tell her how strong she was, how much he loved her. Clara never heard from her father again. Occasionally, news would reach them from Sheridan. Walter Dawson's business had suffered after Thomas Whitmore withdrew his partnership. The mercantile struggled for a few years before Walter sold it and moved to Denver. Clara felt a pang when she heard, but it was distant, like hearing about a stranger's misfortune. That part of her life was so far removed from who she had become that it barely felt real anymore. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Flynn took Clara out to the spot where he had first found her, crying under the stars in her wedding dress. They sat in the grass together, their shoulders touching the way they had that first night, and looked up at the familiar constellations. "You remember what you told me that night?" Clara asked. "About the stars not caring about our problems." "I remember everything about that night," Flynn replied. "I think you were wrong," Clara said. "I think the stars were watching over me. I think they knew I needed help and they sent you." "I was the lucky one," Flynn said. "I could have ridden past. If I had been 10 minutes earlier or later, I might have missed you entirely. But I did not. And you changed my entire life, Clara. You made everything better." "We made everything better," Clara said, echoing words she had spoken many times over the years. "Together." They sat there for a long time, holding hands under the stars that had witnessed the beginning of their story. From the house a mile away, Clara could hear their children's laughter as Mrs. Patterson, who often came to help with the grandchildren she had adopted as her own, supervised the evening meal. Clara thought about the girl she had been, trapped and desperate, running from a life she could not bear. She thought about Flynn stopping when he could have kept riding, sitting beside her when she needed someone most, offering her a chance at something different. She thought about all the moments since then, the struggles and triumphs, the ordinary days that had built into an extraordinary life. "What are you thinking about?" Flynn asked, the same question he had asked countless times over the years. "About how grateful I am," Clara replied. "For that night, for you stopping, for every single day since then. About how the worst night of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." "The best thing that ever happened to both of us," Flynn corrected, pulling her closer and kissing the top of her head. As they sat there under the stars, Clara felt the deep contentment of a life well lived. She had worked hard, loved deeply, built something real and lasting with her own 2 hands. She had raised children who knew they were loved, who were learning to be strong and kind like their father. She had found her home, not in a place but in a person, in the cowboy who had sat beside her under the stars and stayed by her side ever since. The night air was warm and gentle, carrying the smell of prairie grass and the distant sound of horses nickering in their corrals. Flynn's hand was warm in hers, familiar and steady after all these years. Their children were safe and happy. The ranch was thriving. The stars above were the same ones that had witnessed Clara's darkest moment and her greatest joy. "I love you," Clara said softly. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me every single day." "I love you too," Flynn replied. "And I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. That is the easiest decision I have ever made." They stayed out under the stars for a while longer. Two people who had found each other when they both needed it most, who had built a life together from nothing but love and determination. When they finally walked back to the house hand in hand, Clara looked back once at the spot where she had sat crying all those years ago. That desperate, frightened girl seemed like someone from another lifetime, but Clara was grateful to her. She had been brave enough to run, to reach for something better, to accept help when it was offered. Inside their home, their children ran to greet them. Samuel, now a tall 10-year-old who looked more like Flynn every day. Sarah at 8, already showing signs of her mother's determination, and the 5-year-old twins creating their usual cheerful chaos. Mrs. Patterson had dinner ready, and they all sat around the table together, this family they had built from heartbreak and hope. After the children were asleep and Mrs. Patterson had headed back to the Triple Creek, Clara and Flynn sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" Clara asked. "If you had not stopped that night, if I had gone through with the wedding?" "I try not to," Flynn admitted. "Those thoughts are too painful. I cannot imagine my life without you and the children." "I do not want to imagine it." "Me neither," Clara agreed. "I was just thinking how one moment can change everything. One choice, one person stopping when they could have kept going, and suddenly your entire life goes in a completely different direction." "The best choice I ever made was stopping," Flynn said. "The second best was asking you to marry me. The third best was probably buying this land, though that one is distant third," Clara laughed. "What about having children?" "That was not a choice so much as a blessing," Flynn said seriously. "Each one of them is a gift I never expected to receive." "You are going to make me cry," Clara warned. "Happy tears, though. Always happy tears when it comes to you." As the years continued to pass, the Evening Star Ranch grew and prospered. Samuel developed his father's gift with horses and eventually took over much of the training operation. Sarah surprised everyone by developing a talent for business, helping her mother manage the ranch's finances and expanding their operations into breeding cattle as well as horses. The twins, inseparable as always, worked together on every task and eventually pioneered new training methods that brought clients from as far away as California. Clara and Flynn aged together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year rather than fading. They weathered hard winters and drought years, celebrated successes and mourned losses, always side by side. The calluses on Clara's hands never went away, but she wore them proudly. They were evidence of a life well lived, of work done and obstacles overcome. When their first grandchild was born, a daughter Samuel named Emily, Clara held the tiny baby and thought about circles and cycles, about how she had run from one life and found another beyond anything she could have imagined. She told Emily the story, even though the baby could not understand yet, about running away under the stars and meeting a kind cowboy who stopped when he could have kept riding. Flynn, now in his 50s with silver threading through his dark hair, stood behind Clara with his hands on her shoulders as she held their grandchild. "Still the best decision I ever made," he murmured, and Clara knew he was talking about that night so many years ago. Mrs. Patterson, now quite elderly but still sharp as ever, visited often and loved to tell the story of the bride in the ruined wedding dress who showed up at her door and became one of the finest ranch women she had ever known. "I knew you had it in you," she would tell Clara. From that very first day, I saw the steel underneath all that fancy upbringing. The little room off the kitchen where Clara had first slept eventually became a guest room, and then later a nursery for grandchildren when they visited. Sometimes Clara would stand in the doorway and remember being that frightened girl, exhausted and uncertain, having no idea what the future would hold. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, better than all right. That she would find love and purpose, and a family that chose each other every single day. On warm summer evenings, Clara and Flynn would still ride out to that original spot, the place where their story began. The grass had grown over any trace of that long-ago night, but they both knew exactly where it had been. They would sit together in the gathering dusk, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, and watch the stars emerge one by one. "You have any regrets?" Flynn asked one evening when they were both nearing 60, their children grown and building lives of their own. Clara thought about it carefully, as she always did when Flynn asked serious questions. "I regret that my mother never got to escape the way I did," she said finally. "I regret that my father was so consumed by ambition that he forgot how to love. I regret that Thomas's new wife probably suffered because I ran away and he had to find someone else to trap. But I do not regret running. I do not regret anything that brought me to you and this life we built." "Good," Flynn said, kissing her temple. "Because I would not change a single moment, not even the hard ones. They all led here to you in my arms under these stars, to our children and grandchildren, to the evening star being everything we dreamed it could be." The ranch became something of a legend in the territory over the years. Not just for the quality of its horses, though that reputation was well earned, but for the story behind it. People loved hearing about the bride who ran away and the cowboy who stopped to help her, about how they built an empire together from nothing but love and hard work. Young couples would sometimes ride out to visit, asking advice about starting their own ranches or just wanting to see proof that true love really could triumph over circumstance. Clara and Flynn welcomed them all, sharing their story honestly, the struggles along with the triumphs. They wanted people to understand that while their love was real and deep, it had not made their lives easy. They had worked for everything they had, faced drought and disease and economic hardship like everyone else. What their love had given them was not an escape from life's difficulties, but a partner to face those difficulties with. "That is what people do not always understand about love," Clara told a young woman who visited one day, preparing to leave her own difficult family situation. "It is not a magic solution that makes everything perfect, but it gives you someone to stand with while you face the imperfect parts. It makes the hard things bearable and the good things even better." As Clara moved into her 60s, her health began to decline. Nothing dramatic at first, just a gradual slowing down, a persistent tiredness that rest did not quite fix. Flynn noticed immediately and insisted she see a doctor when next they went to Sheridan, the town she had once fled from. The town had changed dramatically over the years. Most of the people who remembered Walter Dawson's daughter running from her wedding were gone or too old to care. The doctor, a young man new to the territory, examined Clara thoroughly and delivered news that she had already suspected. Her heart was wearing out. Not failing exactly, but weakening. There was nothing to be done except rest more, stress less, and appreciate the time she had left. Flynn took the news hard, harder than Clara did. She had lived a full life, longer and better than many people got, but Flynn was not ready to face a world without her in it. "We have had 35 years together," Clara reminded him gently as they rode home from town. "That is more than most people ever get. We have children and grandchildren who are happy and healthy. We built something that will last beyond us. That is enough, Flynn. That is more than enough." "It is not enough for me," Flynn said roughly. "I will never have enough time with you." Clara reached over and took his hand. "Then we will make the most of whatever time we have left. No sadness, no regrets, just gratitude for what we have been given." They did exactly that. Clara continued working on the ranch as long as she was able, though she finally agreed to let Sarah take over most of the paperwork. She spent long afternoons with her grandchildren, telling them stories and teaching them to bake bread. She and Flynn took short rides together in the evenings, always ending up at their special spot under the stars. One particularly beautiful evening in late autumn, as the leaves were turning gold and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter was coming, Clara and Flynn sat under the stars one final time. Clara knew, somehow, that this would be her last visit to this place. Her heart was struggling more each day, and while she was not afraid of dying, she wanted one more evening here where it all began. "Tell me again," she said to Flynn, nestled against his side. "Tell me about that night you found me." Flynn's voice was thick with emotion, but he told the story they both knew by heart. About riding home late, about seeing a figure in white sitting alone in the darkness, about something pulling him to stop and check if the person needed help. About sitting down beside a crying woman and having no idea she would become his entire world. "Best decision I ever made," he said, as he always did. "Best night of my life," Clara replied, as she always did, even though it did not seem like it at the time. "Everything good in my life came from that moment, from you choosing to stop and sit beside me." "I love you," Flynn said. "I have loved you since that night, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "Thank you for giving me a life worth living. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this beautiful life with me." They sat there until the stars were bright overhead, the same stars that had watched their story unfold over 3.5 decades. Clara felt peaceful, complete in a way she had never expected to feel. She had been loved deeply and had loved the same way in return. She had children who were good people, who would carry on the values she and Flynn had tried to instill. She had built something lasting, something that mattered. Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks later, Flynn holding her hand the way he had held it countless times over the years. The grief that followed was profound, but so was the gratitude. Their children organized a funeral that drew people from all over the territory, all wanting to pay respects to the woman who had shown them that it was possible to run from the wrong life and build the right one. Flynn lived for another 10 years, continuing to run the Evening Star with his children's help. He never remarried, telling anyone who suggested it that he had already had his great love and did not need another. He spent his evenings on the porch, often staring out at the stars, and people would see him talking quietly as if having a conversation with someone only he could see. When Flynn finally passed at the age of 72, his children buried him beside Clara on a hill overlooking the Evening Star Ranch, under the open sky where the stars could always shine down on them. On the simple headstone they placed between the graves, Samuel carved the words that had become the family story. He found her crying under the stars. He sat beside her. They were together ever since. The Evening Star Ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, each one adding to the legacy Clara and Flynn had begun. The story of how it started, of a runaway bride and a kind cowboy, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder of what love and courage could build. And on clear nights, when the stars shone bright over the Wyoming prairie, People swore they could feel something special in that spot where Flynn had first found Clara. A sense of hope, of possibility, of the magic that happens when someone chooses to stop and sit beside someone who needs them. When kindness meets desperation and creates something beautiful that lasts far beyond a single lifetime. The Evening Star Ranch stood as testament to a simple truth, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are really beginnings in disguise, that running toward an unknown future can be braver than staying in a known misery. That real love is not found in grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but in someone who sees you in your darkest moment and chooses to stay, to help, to build something better together. Clara had run away from her wedding, terrified and alone, and found instead a love story that would span decades and inspire generations. Flynn had stopped when he could have kept riding and gained a wife, a family, and a legacy that would outlive them both. Together, they had proved that you do not need a fancy beginning to build a beautiful life. You just need courage, love, and someone willing to sit beside you under the stars.